And friend, just tell us about the last time you were arrested.
I'd had a fallout with my wife and left in a huff and didn't want to go back. And I was living at the edge of Dartmoor at the time, and I cycled as far as Exeter before I discovered that the only road that I could find that said Bristol was the M5. And once I'd reached it, I didn't want to turn around and cycle towards my wife because we'd just had a bus stop. So my thought was just to carry on going away from her as fast as possible. So I got onto the M5, onto the hard shoulder, onto the left-hand side of the hard shoulder on the white line, and I cycled along the white line on the left-hand side of the hard shoulder towards the A38, where I knew that I could actually pick up the A38 and get the rest of the way to Bristol on the A38. But it doesn't start at Exeter. I didn't know how to get onto it. So as I was cycling along, I heard a funny noise behind me. It's kind of meep-map, whoop, whoop noise. To which I turned my head as far as I could without leaving track of where I was going, because you don't actually want to turn your head all the way around when you're on a bicycle. Right. And I couldn't see anything behind me, so I carried on cycling. A little while later, there was a similar noise, a meep-map, whoop, whoop. And again, I didn't see anything, so I carried on. This noise repeated a few more times, and I thought to myself, there are strange creatures in these parts.
You were right.
After a little while, a very flashy motor went round me and pulled up onto the hard shoulder in front of me, a distance ahead of me, and pulled over. The door opened and a gentleman, well, I presume gentleman, got out of the car and walked behind his car. He stood facing me and said, "Pull over," in a loud voice. To which I replied, "Get back in your fucking car," in a pissed off voice. He said again, "Pull over." I said again, "Get back in your fucking car." He said, "Pull over," a third time, by which time I was getting quite close to him. He didn't look the happiest chappie in the world, and I figured it was best to avoid him. So I pulled over. I couldn't go left because I would have gone down the embankment. So the only way I could pull over was to the right. So I pulled over into the slow lane of the motorway. To which he said, "Pull over," again. I said, "Get back in your fucking car," again. And he stepped into the slow lane of the motorway. I presumed he was about to rugby tackle me by his stance, the way that he was standing. And I tried to avoid him. So I did pull over. This put me in the middle lane of the motorway. He started walking across the slow lane of the motorway towards me and shouted, "Pull over," again in an even louder, more aggressive voice. I told him to get back in his fucking car and headed for the fast lane where all the cars that were avoiding us were travelling. As I started heading towards the fast lane, the gentleman turned and got back in his fucking car. At which point I was pretty much level with him, and I pulled in front of him into the hard shoulder and continued on my route. As I travelled along the road, I became aware of the fact that there were more than one police car. First there were two, one in front of me and one behind me, then 3, 4 and 5.
Was this guy in plain clothes, please?
They were wearing their uniforms, the Gestapo black and silver. Sorry, is it not Gestapo black and silver? SS, should I call it?
The car that pulled over was actually a marked police car.
It was a flashy motor, yeah. It was
marked.
It was fluorescent lights and
yes.
all the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah. So I carried on, and I had 3 cars on my right-hand side on the slow lane of the motorway, 1 police car in front of me and 1 police car behind me. One of the policemen in the cars on my right-hand side had opened the window, was saying, well, asking me questions about my intent. I told him my intent was to go to London because I just wanted to keep on going. And they asked me if I would, they said that they wanted me to stop for my own health. They were concerned for my safety, I think it was. They were concerned for my safety. And I said to them, surely if you're concerned for my safety, you'll do something about all these prats that are going past me poisoning the air that I'm breathing. Now, they didn't appreciate the fact that they themselves were amongst the prats poisoning the air that I was breathing, and continued to give me grief and saying things like I was causing a danger to other users of the motorway. To which I said to them, I'm not the cunt that's driving along at 15 miles an hour in the slow lane. They didn't appreciate my attitude or the way in which I referred to their actions or anything to do with them. They asked me if I'd pull over at the service station, the first exit, which I said to them, if it's the road to the A38, I was intending to get off on that one anyway. So I have no problem pulling off the road. They asked if I'd pull into the service area to have a chat with them. I agreed. We got to the service station, service area. They ordered me into a little out-of-the-way yard. And then I got off my bicycle as fast as I could, tried to stand it on its stand, which it didn't do, and it fell over. I tried to get myself away from my bicycle so as to not be rugby tackled from my bicycle, which in my previous experience, police have, for their own reasons, rugby tackled me off my bicycle. Now, I didn't want this occurring again, so I tried to get myself away from my bicycle. Now, they said that they wanted to talk to me. I said, fair enough, talk. They said, we need to do a search first. And I said, fair enough, and I emptied my contents of my pocket onto the floor and said, there you go, that's everything, search away. They said, we can't search you standing like this, you need to lean against this wall over here. And I walked over to this wall over here and stood as they would like me to, with my arms up, my legs slightly spread, facing the wall. 4 police officers. One tapped down one leg, one tapped down the other leg, one tapped along one arm, one tapped along the other arm. The police officer that was tapping along my right arm, as soon as he got to my wrist, put a handcuff on, which is like a type of spanner, clamped it really tight and started twisting my arm to get it behind my back. The police officer on my left-hand side took hold of my arm and started trying to put it behind my back as well. Neither of them succeeded in moving my arms from in front and beside me, so the other 2 policemen that were with them took part as well, one helping the one with the handcuff and one helping the other one. They seemed to still be struggling, and from my memory, I think other police officers were involved in getting my arms behind my back as well. But eventually, I was overpowered to the point where they'd placed handcuffs on me behind my back against my will. At which point they turned me round and I said, I do not consent to your policing. I do not consent at all to being policed by you. I do not consent. Please, officer, write this down. I do not consent. One of the policemen wrote down, does not consent, on the back of his glove. They then placed me under arrest. Now, as far as I'm aware, you're not supposed to be handcuffed before you're arrested. So I was physically assaulted by them. I was very angry. I was angry at being stopped on my way. I was angry at being arrested when they just wanted to talk to me. No, they didn't want to talk to me, they just wanted to abuse me. Well, they decided then they would put me in the back of a motor. So they frog marched me towards a motor, a vehicle, of which they opened the back door. The back door wasn't as tall as I am, so I didn't fit. I held my body as rigid as I could and tried to stay as upright as I could so as to still not fit however much effort they put into putting me in there. Eventually, between the 8 to 10 policemen that I'd managed to gather in my journey, they got me into the back of that motor. I asked the gentleman in the front to take the handcuffs off. He ignored me. I tried to make it so he couldn't ignore me. I started to headbutt the perspex screen between me and him, saying, take these fucking cuffs off me, you cunt, you wanker, you bastard. I then continued to call them cunts, wankers and arseholes for the next 14 hours whilst they locked me in the cell They couldn't process me because all they could get out of me was cunt, wanker, arsehole, cunt, wanker, arsehole at the top of my voice. At about 12 o'clock at night, I had a psychiatric assessment from 3 police psychiatrists.
Oh.
I'd chatted to the police psychiatrists. I tried to calm myself. Well, I'd pretty much fallen asleep. You know, I'd run out of energy.
Right.
Really. I had a chat with the police psychiatrists, and I said to them, yeah, I've got a mental health problem. I'm part of a parasitic life form that's devoiding its host planet of its ability to support life, and I need to be part of a symbiotic life form that's supporting the life of its host planet. This to me is a mental health problem, and if it's not a mental health problem to you, you're in denial. And they had to agree with me, because really and truly, as a race, unless we start looking after the planet we live on, we have no future. For me, it's a passion. I want a future that's worth having. I don't want to see the elephants die out before I die. I want to know that there's still rhinos running around the plains when I die. I want to know that there's still polar bears when I die. I don't want it all to just fade in front of me. And I know that every one of us has been educated to believe that we don't have any power to do anything about it. We've been trained to say, it's too big a problem, I'm too small, I can't do anything. Yet every single one of us turns the key in our car or switches the heating up, and every one of us is responsible. So I see my purpose in being as trying to actually wake people up to the responsibility that we've got for this planet. And it's a hard job, especially when you've got people like the police who work for the government who have got not a fucking brain cell to rub between them. And how do you get through to people that have been trained and indoctrinated in the use of force and violence? I don't know how to. But I know that the future that I need comes from the heart, not the fist. And it's not about having the force or the arms. And after a bit of a conversation with the police psychiatrists, they went off and somebody came up to the cell door and offered to let me out. To which I said, well, actually, I'm starting to quite like it in here. I'm thinking about staying. Sorry, I did. And he said, all right then. And I said, oh, no, all right, I'll go. And he showed me my bicycle, got my bicycle out of the police out of one of the rooms, and it had been damaged a little bit by the policeman that had put it in the van, but it's only a little bit of damage. I'm not bothered that much. But he then said, well, now you can get on your way. And I said, well, I was planning on cycling towards London, but unfortunately I've got no lights and it's the middle of the night.
Right.
And he went, oh, right. And he disappeared again. And a little while later he came back and he said, look, we've had a chat and we've phoned up all the cars, and they've said that if they see you cycling along the road, they won't pull you over. So for my safety, they were going to pull me over for riding on the left-hand side of the hard shoulder on a motorway that's got a 18-foot wide hard shoulder that's perfectly safe that nobody drives in. And instead they're going to let me drive down country lanes in the middle of the night with no lights on. So I was left a bit stupefied, and I went and spent the night sleeping on the steps of the cinema in Exeter before leaving in the morning towards London. And then 2 months later, I had to go to court in Exeter to face up.
You?
Apparently, even though they didn't say they were going to charge me or anything like that when they let me go, they just let me go. 2 months later, I discovered that actually they'd sent a letter to my wife, and they wanted me to appear in court. And if I hadn't gone under my own steam and cycled back down to Exeter to go to the court, they would have arrested me and put me in the back of a van and driven me against my will down there. So I would have been kidnapped and abused again. So I had the choice of either, under my own free will, in inverted commas, going to a place that I didn't want to go, or being taken to a place that I didn't want to go under an oppressive regime. There you go.
What happened in the courtroom?
I chatted to the duty solicitor. He said I would go innocent if I was you. You know, if I was standing up and representing you, I'd go innocent, because really and truly they shouldn't have put the handcuffs on you and physically abused you, before they'd given you the arrest.
Yeah.
So therefore they've done it in the wrong order, and therefore I would have gone that way. But as you seem to have absolutely no respect for the law in any way, shape or form, it's up to you what you do, and if you like, you can lie in court. And so I figured that the police account of what they were saying that I did was close enough to the truth for me to be able to stretch the truth enough to be able to agree to going guilty on all 3 counts. And that's what I did. I pleaded guilty on all 3 counts.
Yeah.
They took into account the fact that I'd cycled for 3 days to get there and gave me a £20 fine. But it didn't make up for the fact that they had inconvenienced me quite so much as well, and kidnapped me and held me against my will and all the rest of it. So I got to pay for the honour of all that shit.
Why did you go guilty?
Why did I go guilty?
Yeah.
Because it was the quickest way of not having to be there.
Right.
If I go innocent,
Yeah,
in inverted commas,
come back again.
then I have to go back again. If I go guilty, they can deal with it there and then. I don't have to see them ever again in my life. So I went guilty for that reason. Purely and simply, just fucking get rid of it. I'm not bothered with it. This isn't something I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is having a future. And they are not interested in giving it to me. They're interested in perpetuating the past. And perpetuating the past isn't going to give us a future. So,
Thank you.